On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Taha Hussain. He is a leadership coach, and we're going to be talking about motivating people to solve tough problems. And we're going to be covering, areas of how do you help people through motivation, learning new skills. When you challenge somebody, they have to be able to raise the bar, and you have to support them. It's not always just asking people to go jump higher. You need to provide that guidance to make sure that they're supported in the right ways. Taha, I'm excited to have you on to talk about this.
Excited to be here.
Awesome. So before we dive in, let's start off right at the top. If you could just let everyone know a quick summary of who you are so that we can have some context to the episode.
Awesome. So I'm Taha Hussain. I am a software engineer who turned into a manager and leader at tech companies. I worked at startups, tech companies like Microsoft, Yahoo, Walmart. And last year, I started a business for leadership coaching. And so what I do is I work with individuals and also groups to talk about leadership and how can they lead their teams and themselves better.
Awesome. I think this topic kind of fits right into your wheelhouse of leadership. And it's a great topic about motivating people to solve tough problems. And I know obviously, there's probably, different ways to approach this. And I want to hear your take, because obviously the biggest challenge people have when solving any problem is how to go about actually the process of figuring out what to tackle, right? A lot of times somebody tells you, go do this. And for the most part, if you don't know how to solve it, you have to spend some cycles just to figuring out what don't you know, trial and error. That doesn't necessarily fit or help a company in reality. Obviously, it's not what they want somebody to do, but a lot of times it happens. I guess from your point of view, when you kind of think about people and approaching problems, tough problems, what are some of the initial frameworks of helping support someone, right? Like right off the bat, I want to go ask somebody to do something that might not be in their wheelhouse. They might not be comfortable. What do I do?
Well, that's a great question. Asking people to solve tough problems, an example is they haven't tried something before, something new for them. I'll talk about a story. There's back in Yahoo, when I was a new manager, I had a new team and I didn't know anyone on the team. And I was doing one-on-ones. And one of the engineers, who was a senior engineer, he asked me about his growth plan. And so I asked him because a lot of team members that we had worked on big data. And he didn't have the expertise in that. So I asked him, hey, we need help over there. And so it'd be great for him to learn this new skill. And he was like, hey, big data, that's like, he seemed like big data is like too big, like out of my comfort zone. I haven't even heard about it. I see people talk about it. It seems like something too big for me. And so that was one thing I realized. And then over the course of 1 week, I got to know more about him, what he really likes doing, what his strength is. He was a great Java programmer. I mean, he could write code like I have not seen people write code like that sometimes. And so I saw that, and that's a basic requirement for you to learn the technology of big data. But he didn't know that part. The second part was the team actually needed a lot of help. The team signed up for big goals by the chief architect for the company in that quarter. And so we didn't have enough strength to fix all those problems in that quarter. So I went to this guy and I said, so first thing is that we want to connect people with a pain point that they care about, somebody that they care about. If you are, say, for example, in the esports industry, like I was in the last time, people care about the player's experience. But sometimes it's not the customer, it's your immediate team members or your family members or your friends, whoever that is. And so I talked about the team that he's working in for a while, and he's a senior engineer, and the team desperately needs someone to come and help. And based on what I've seen him doing, his Java, his expertise, he's the right candidate to solve that problem. I could go and hire somebody, but I would still be doubt, but this person can actually solve this problem. So what I did was to make people go towards solving a tough problem, you need to show why it's important, because they have to get out of their safe zone. I don't call it comfort zone. I call it safe zone. They have to come out of the safe zone feeling I can fail. And at the same time, you have to give them confidence that they can do it. You have to make them believe that they are the ones who can actually do it. You know what? In 3 months, the person not only learned the stuff, he was the maximum contributor to the code base. My boss was amazed by that.
Interesting. You said something Really, I think interesting there when you said move out of their safe zone. And obviously, as people, we are kind of risk averse, right? Humans, however way you view evolution, that's a whole different topic. I'm not an expert, but obviously part of our DNA is built on survival still. And our safe zone, our comfort zone is very important to us. So, you mentioned connecting the problem, why it's important. You're trying to connect that why, give them a reason to move out of their safe zone. So to get somebody to move out of their safe zone and for them to feel comfortable that failure is okay, is part of that solution also understanding that it's, the accountability component isn't, we don't want that quote unquote blame culture. We want to understand what happened, but you're safe if you fail. Because a lot of times we talk about creating that blameless culture, but most people don't feel that's accurate or true.
That's an excellent point, that we are not feeling safe because we would be judged by the results or the work we are doing. And so if I fail, I'll be judged by that. And while that sounds true, it's also based on behaviorism that Watson suggested, came up with 100 years ago. And that has been proven wrong, because we are now saying that, hey, I like you as a team member because you're doing good rewards. The day you don't produce rewards, I don't like you. And there's a lot of corporate culture talking about why you should not have friends at work. But the thing is that as a human being I'm working with, you are going to build a happy relationship with them. Drawing those lines is much more difficult than accepting those lines, that these are human beings. I'm just working with them. The main goal over here is not to tell people to produce excellent results. It's about, did you put in your best effort? If you have put in your best effort, that's what counts, because there's so many unknowns that are happening and you can't control everything. So as an example, there's a movie called Apollo 13, which Ed Harris plays the role of the flight operation. And this is based on a real story. And they talk about how there was one guy whose team built the lunar module. And now they need to use the lunar module to land on Earth. And he's asking to do it. And he's saying, hey, I don't want to take any responsibility because I didn't design it to land on Earth. I designed it to land on Moon. And this Gene Ed Harris keeps on focusing on, hey, but that's not the design. We got to work with what we have. And so this guy wasn't talking about that he's not feeling safe. Eventually, he figured it out. And he said, okay, I know what you're trying to do. I'm not going to hold you personally responsible. If it lights, it lights. And then everyone sort of make it work. Because if you are not feeling safe, you can do all the reasoning you want. The person is frozen. They're not going to do anything about it. That's just our nature. And so accepting that as a reality, that we have to make people safe and not create an environment in which their creativity does not flourish, doesn't work for us.
That's a good example. And I think in this case, I guess, the Apollo 13, that's a good example of a case where somebody does have to take that risk. And sometimes, and I guess the example you had at Yahoo, you observe this person, you felt very confident that their skill set would translate. And I guess sometimes, we do have that component of this person plus some new skill is going to mean they can achieve this. And as a manager, maybe you're observing that person obviously is in the thick of it. They're not necessarily, seeing that purview of where they are with that gap. That gap is important though, right? And obviously the organization has to make an investment for that person to upskill, learn whatever they need to do to be able to tackle this problem. If it is a skill-based issue, you also have to take into account somebody needs that time, somebody needs to have that opportunity to learn those, that new skill, and then also apply it. There's a cycle. How do you support that? So that obviously people have to still do their job and you're asking them to take on something new and making sure that they have the right skills to do it.
So planning is part of everything. Leaders plan a lot, and they plan to plan a lot too. Plan to plan is very important. And so what you're doing is that you're making a plan as a project manager and taking this as a project. You just go and learn and saying it doesn't work. You got to help the person through the process, help them build a plan, because they are, in this case, was a software engineer. He's not necessarily a project manager, but I am, and I'm supposed to help him with that. So I use my expertise on breaking down his learning goal into small steps, but each step is also aligned with the goals that we need to deliver in a quarter over a period of time. It's not like a big bang. End of 3 months, here's the result. That won't happen. And so we have to break it down in small pieces. But what that does automatically, it creates small achievements. Now the person does something, he solves a problem, feels good about it, gets more confident, picks up a higher task, and then it just becomes a snowball and keeps on rolling. Now, as a manager, you have to manage the learning aspect along with the delivery of the project, and they go hand in hand.
I was actually thinking, as you're mentioning that, you kind of referred to the safe zone. We're talking about skills, and we're talking about, obviously, people have to, they're being challenged to solve something new. It happens every day. They have to, raise some aspects of their ability to deliver. I guess the tricky part, we talked about accountability as well, but the tricky part is when it doesn't happen, right? And obviously, let's say you're in a good environment, there's accountability, but the person themselves, outside of the accountability perspective, if they aren't successful, there's a lot of internal thoughts. Am I good enough? How are they going to view it? My teammates, and that all is impacting someone. And I think, when they're about to take something on, there's even sometimes thinking about the failure or what could happen. And actually, if lo and behold, it does happen, there's a whole component to making sure that that person comes out not feeling, worried about taking another chance, but feeling supported. I guess when you're looking at that side of the house is that, somebody is going to try and they're going to fail. And of course, we're not going to hold them accountable. But for their own well-being, how do you help them understand and support them and pick them up?
Okay, so I'm going to take the help of some biology here. Okay, let me explain one other part before we go into about the fear and handling that. What does it mean, what we are doing? I'll tell you a story about it first. So tomorrow is my daughter's birthday. And about a year ago, around the same time, she started sending me pictures of pugs, like wearing ballerina dresses or dressed up and all of that. And I was thinking, why is she sending these pictures? And I figured she has spoken to me before about having a pug because she likes pugs and maybe she wanted a birthday gift as a pug. Afterwards, I walked out and I saw someone walking with 3 dogs and one of them was a pug. Then I went for a walk in the park. I saw so many pugs. It's like the universe was telling me, you need to buy a pug for your daughter, right? And this happens to us all the time. We think about buying a car. Say, I want to buy a Tesla. And you are thinking, and all you start seeing is Teslas around you. It just happens to us. And so in biology, this is referred to as RAS, reticular activating system. And it's a 2-inch or 2 centimeter thing that sits right above our spinal cord. And that's where it connects our rational mind to our subconscious mind, the emotional mind, which does all the activity. It's also all about feelings. Like fear is a feeling. Safety is a feeling. It's an emotional concern, not a rational concern. And so what's happening is this RAS is like a cup. The concerns we have in this cup, we are going to look at the world with that information because we get about 11 million bits of data every second, but we can only process around 50 bits. 50 versus 11 million. On a good day, you can say 70 bits, but that's still not enough. How do you get all this data extracted every second? So this RAS system acts like a sieve. It takes our concerns, put data through it, and then what comes out is those 50, 70 bits that are all about our concerns. Okay. Now, if I'm concerned about failure, I'm going to see failure everywhere, right? And it's just limited list, right? So we have to work with that. As leaders, lead people by mastering how to manage this RAS, this cup. And they start with themselves first. If you're scared, you will emit more, you will make people more scared around you. And this is why, again, the example of Apollo 13, everyone was scared. And these are all like moonshots, they're all scared. But this leader is not scared. He's thinking, hey, failure is not an option. You got to go bring people over here. And he has to have that. If he's scared, he would not be able to, lead other people when he's scared. So knowing you can fail is important so you can build a plan, but focusing on failure is not a good strategy. That makes that all you see is failure around you. And you start thinking, I'm going to fail, and you end up failing. So as a leader, as people are working through that, you have to keep on giving confidence. And so motivation is something that I say as it's like an energy, and it's a different energy. It's not like it doesn't build up slowly. It's like a big bang kind of a thing. Like an event happens when the person that you are motivating generates a feeling inside of themselves, which makes them change the course of what they're thinking. Okay. And that's a big bang kind of energy happens inside them that they do. And so that talk has to happen. So for Yahoo, for example, my talk was with that person about the teammates and he can do it. And I believe in him. And after that, it's like just keeping momentum going on. You meet the person on a regular basis, but if we have defined problem into smaller pieces, they're not looking at failure. They're building confidence. And if they fail at a small task, another task, then you can pivot. It's like a project. So it's not totally they start and they finish on the end. You manage the process and you learn in that process. So you have small failures, and then you start pivoting and you figure out what you want to do. So it builds confidence in them. So as a leader, that RAS that you're working with the person, you're focusing on what's in their sieve. You know, what are they looking at? And each time when they're looking at something, help them figure out it's doable and they can do it.
Interesting. Yeah, I think when I was listening to you talk about the 11 million bits of information coming in, we can process 50 bits a second. And I was thinking, how many times does somebody find themselves overwhelmed when they're tracking a problem? And it could be anything. It doesn't have to be work. It could be home. And it's interesting that we're trying to potentially process over our capacity, and all of a sudden you throw your hands up and you're like, I can't. And you kind of mentioned, that factor of if you could help somebody and actually break that down to a smaller, bite-sized component to help them through the process. Sometimes that's all we need, so that you're not trying to process that whole ocean. It sounds like it'd be impossible for our minds anyways.
Yeah, so breaking it down like that helps relieve anxiety, and it also breaks down to smaller pieces, so you can pinpoint and focus on the problem.
Yeah, it's funny is I do a lot of podcasts, and a lot of times things come back to very few fundamental psychological things: safe zone, psychology component, anxiety psychology component, motivation. It's really interesting how as people managers, a lot of the aspect of it is to help understand, your direct reports, understand them to get through some of those mental components, because skills are probably less of an issue, because when you hire somebody, you do know what you're getting. And kind of what you've been talking about, this motivation component is, and you went back to in the beginning, you mentioned, if you could explain to them why the problem's important, to help them focus, to get them on the same page, to help them raise their game. It's really interesting. It's so much of an art. And there's so little people get taught on the job before the job of becoming managed to help people, approach these type of managerial problems. And that's the real challenge in being a manager is, you're part psychologist, you're part, person who breaks down work, as you mentioned. I mean, it's all these different hats that you have to wear, and this one's critical.
You are right in the point. The way I look at the aspect of you are a people manager and a psychologist, for example, it's a little bit different than that. We have not been taught formally, about so many things. For example, one of the things that I learned last year is how important is storytelling. And we are never taught storytelling in school. There is no course. I mean, they talk about writing essays, but they don't teach you formally how to write stories. And we watch stories around us all the time. Growing up in cartoons, watching movies, it's all stories. But the way we communicate to ourselves is in terms of stories. We motivate each other using stories. That's the key component. So we are not being taught how to lead ourselves. So my main goal is to learn, as a leader, you got to learn how to lead yourself first. And so then what are we leading over here? Have you read a book called The Happiness Hypothesis? Yeah. So Jonathan Haidt, in that book, he uses a story that he went to Arizona and he was riding a horse. He learned the horse. And then as he started, the horse was taking a walk, it started going towards the cliff. And then he started moving the horse, but the horse wouldn't turn. And then he started panicking and the horse kept walking towards the cliff. And then the horse stopped. like 5 feet before the cliff. And then, once he caught his breath, he looked around. It was amazing scene. It could only be seen 5 feet from the cliff, at least, and on a horse. The horse was actually trained to bring visitors at this location. After 10 minutes, he turned the horse turned. So he writes about this, that, brain works like that. He's a psychologist. He says, we have a rational mind, we have an emotional mind. And the rider's responsibility as a rational mind is to guide the elephant. Cannot force the elephant so this is a horse. He talks about an elephant instead. Our emotional mind is as big like an elephant, 6 tons, while the rational mind is like 0.1 tons. And so rider can't force the elephant. You have to influence the elephant. And the way to influence the elephant is by telling stories the elephant cares about. And so if you, like there's a leader in Pakistan who used to be an ex-prime minister. His mother went through cancer in 85 and she died. And then he built a cancer charity hospital in Pakistan in 80s, like early 90s. Like that's a corrupt country. But he did that through charity. And he had no expertise in cancer or medicine or anything, but he felt the pain of his mother and he saw other people don't have access to the care and they're going to the pain. So he felt their pain as if he's feeling his mother's pain. And that's why he went towards solving that problem. And so these things move us. Connections are so important to us. When people talk about at work, there's no friends because you have to sit them by one day. I say, you're not fully committing yourself into it because you'll be hurt one day. You might have to say them goodbye, and that's just part of life. But at least devote yourself completely as a team member.
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting. I think storytelling is something very hard to actually master. I think it's always a work in progress. And I think when you're talking about the conversations you're having with your teammates, you're trying to phrase the why of that problem and connect. I think I guess Simon Sinek talks about that a lot. If people can connect that why, that does change the attributes. And I guess that's storytelling, that ability does help. So we've been talking a lot about the high level of motivating people. We've been trying to get them to understand, connect with the problem. I guess on a little bit more of a micro level, right? Not the macro, but looking more at the day-to-day, the weekly. You're going to have one-on-ones with people on your team. And if you have asked somebody to go outside their safe zone to try to tackle a problem, when you're in your one-on-ones, what are you hoping to see to help, kind of observe their progress or make sure that they're still supported on that, like that one-on-one basis with the time that you have with them?
I see. So the first part is that every time I'm having one-on-one with anyone or I'm talking to anyone, I look at what their RAST looks like. Where are they focused? This is what the entire world says, where focus goes, energy flows. So if they're focused on a personal problem that they're having at home, and we say, hey, don't bring your personal problems to work, the thing is that a human can't leave their problems at home. It's part of their life. So you kind of have to accept that will be there. So, and everybody's going through something every day in life. So when a person comes, I let them air out what they're thinking about. And for them, they have to feel comfortable that they can share anything they want to. So you have to build that trust with them. It takes a while with some people. And so they'll share information. You realize if they're having some personal trouble and stuff, that you have to work towards that. You have to help them air it out so that they can now remove those things out of the RAST. So you are a RAST master. Your job is to figure out your own, and you also can help the other people work with their RAST. So I focus mainly on that. And if those things are causing trouble, for example, the personal problem, help them air it out, they take it out. Then I ask them some questions. And here's an example. For example, if somebody is not responding themselves to something, like they're sitting, like they're not excited about, or they're not thinking about it. The way I do it is, you think about this rubber band over here, right? So if you have a rubber band and you move it like this, now there's tension between them. So if I say, hey, you are here and this is your goal, and I'm going to set a goal over here, it's going to immediately create a tension over here. Okay. And so one response would be remove the goal state. I want to go back. I don't want to do it. And that's how you can release the tension. Other way is that let's make a plan. Let's go towards solving this problem. And so the goal over here is to create this tension first. And the way you create that is by asking questions. We invoke critical thinking. Instead of saying, hey, I want you to work on this, talk about the problem and say, what do you think we should be doing about this? And now they are using the critical thinking. From their perspective, they're thinking, okay, I have autonomy in how I solve the problems. And if they're not excited, you didn't define the problem correctly. you got to connect the problem with them. Like, he wasn't excited about big data. And I said, hey, your teammates need it. You can do it. And then he got excited about that. So you have to work with that. But the first step starts with these two things. So there's a framework for it. It's a famous framework. People don't talk about it like this, though. It's called the GROW framework. And you are helping people grow. Whenever they solve a problem, we're always growing. So G is for goal. So you define the goal over here. And the second part is that you define the reality. R is for reality. So now you have to do these two things. It creates an energy now. Now, you're not telling them what it is. You're having a discussion with them through Q&A. And they are the ones who are saying, oh, this should be the goal. Or this is what the reality looks like. So with this one, because you're asking questions, you have to convince them. There is no convincing. There is no argument. It's a conversation. You're asking questions, they're answering. You're not even suggesting anything. Now, with this one, you will also explore if they're not moving towards this, there are some obstacles. So I say strategy is about when you want to hit a goal, if there is no obstacle, you can just make the goal. But there are obstacles in between. They're defenders, they're lines of defense. So you got to have a strategy to overcome those defenses. And so when you have obstacles, you got to have a strategy for that. And so for this person, he was saying, hey, big data is too much for me, for example. And so for that, he needed some confidence, some actual confidence. And I was also, back in the day, used to be a very good big data engineer, but I did not mentor him. My goal was to coach him because he had his own talent and he could go and find all the information he wants to. So obstacle is there. O is for obstacles, but so also for options. Sometimes people will start discussing options. Hey, I'm excited. I want to do this. And if there are obstacles, you help them move the obstacles that are part of their ask. And then you start discussing options with them. Again, questions. So they come up with, hey, I can do this, I can do that, I can learn this first, and I can do that. So you're planning with them also around this thing. They're part of the planning process. And so the ownership is completely on them. You're not owning anything. You're saying, I'm here to help you go towards that direction. You're asking questions. They are the one who's giving you the solutions. They are the ones who are saying, this should be the goal. This is the reality it looks like. You're only challenging them when they are not looking deeper or they have blind spots. You are only challenging through questions like that. And this is Socrates' method of invoking critical thinking. Now, the last step is will, which is what will you do next? And the important part is once they discuss what they want to do, like it's out there, it's not part of the RAS. Like when they talk about it, now it automatically goes onto the RAS, the list that they want. Now they start looking forward towards it. All the data they see around them, 11 million bits, the filtered 50 bits that come out is part of the GROW plan. And because they have the ownership. Ownership is the key piece for motivation, to motivate people to do something.
Absolutely. Taha, I love the conversation. I think there's so much more we could probably cover. We'll have to save it for another episode, but fantastic insights. And I'm going to have to try to work on my RAS myself. I think like everyone else, like you said, that's a work in progress. So fantastic stuff. I like to ask all my guests this question, and it's if they could have a future guest cover a topic, what topic they would like to hear about.
Excellent question. I am going to give you, there's a topic that I've been researching and I don't have an exact answer yet on that. I have like different people, different theories, and I want an expert come in and talk about that. And that's on the word of gratitude. If you think about it, everywhere, let's talk about religions for a minute. Almost all the religions, no matter what they do, they talk about gratitude, no matter where they come from. Right? So that's one thing. The other part is that even now, people who don't follow religions in the community of leadership and others, they talk about gratitude. You mentioned Simon Sinek. He talks about gratitude. Right? He talked about something, hey, I don't have a bucket list because then it means I'm not enjoying what I have. I don't have gratitude for that. And so the question is that, why is gratitude so important for us to do big things? How does it motivate us? People say if you don't have gratitude, then you're not attracting things towards you. Why is that? I want to know a lot more about that.
That's a good one. I like that. How would you like somebody to reach out to you, by the way? Because I'm sure other people want to reach out and pick your brain on what you spoke about.
LinkedIn is one of the best options to reach out to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We will make sure we include that. Taha, thanks for being on the podcast. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. It was great.
Same here. Thank you, Amir. It was great being here.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's it for this episode. We'll be back again, different guests, different topic. Until then, two things. One, I think that topic of gratitude is a great discussion, and understanding how it impacts people management teams, why it's so important, and could go a ton of different directions. But if you're an expert or know someone who could talk on that subject, I'd love to have you on the podcast. And secondly, if you find the podcast useful, please share it with somebody else. That's how the podcast has grown. And I appreciate anyone who does share it. And also leave a review, subscribe. That's the other way we like to see growth, is through the subscriptions. So I appreciate anyone who is subscribing. And until next time, thank you and goodbye.